Okay, welcome to the Witcher Companion series that I'm starting. Um, Basically, I don't have a solid idea of what this is going to be yet. The idea is that the Witcher series have quickly become my favorite fantasy series out there, and I can't get any of my friends to read it. So, this is mostly for them. Try and convince them to give them a little bit of a read. It's also a little bit for me to have a little bit of a retrospective on what I like about the series, just so I can come back to this and remember some of the crazy things that the author does that I really loved. So, I guess to start, this is kind of going to be an intro video, just baseline, why I like The Witcher, I guess my kind of experience with it. Um, so yeah, I guess I'll get started. Uh, I found The Witcher. I was introduced to The Witcher through the TV series. I imagine I'm going to be talking about this quite a bit. Not nearly as much as the books, but it is, no matter how much the fans would like to shun it, it is a part of the Witcher universe. It's out there, it's made. And say what you will about it, but it brought me to the series, and it's my favorite book series out there now. So it's got that going for it, at least. Um, Obviously, I have my gripes with the show, and we're going to get into that. But as for the books, I read them for the first time, and I didn't know what was going on. Because, well, for one, let me say this. The US and the British versions of this series, the publishers, I don't know why they did this, but they labeled the short story books, which are the intros, The Last Wish and The Sword of Destiny, they kind of labeled those as Tales of the Witcher. You might be able to see Tales of the Witcher. That's true. They are Tales from the Witcher, but they're Tales from the Witcher that you're very much going to want to be familiar with if you're jumping into the main series. I jumped into the main series. I hadn't read The Last Wish. I hadn't read The Sword of Destiny. I just jumped right in at Blood of Elves, which by rights should be the third book, but it was my first. And you can do it because I did it. I didn't know what was going on, but I still liked them. But lucky enough, I'm here, and I can tell you how it's really meant to be done. Um, on my second read through, I went through The Last Wish. I swear I have it here. I do. I went through The Last Wish. Oh, um, still didn't read through The Sword of Destiny because I got confused and mixed it up with the Sword of no, the Season of Storms. Hey, it doesn't matter. But basically, still missing crucial context, but my second read through, so much more enjoyable. I don't know if this is I don't pay a lot of attention, especially in the past when reading books. I don't pay the most attention, but reading through the second time was so incredible. And the reason I decided to make these videos, what really led me here was I was finishing up this chapter in the fifth book, or sorry, I'm going to do that a lot. In the final book of the main storyline, The Lady of the Lake, and it blew my mind. I recorded an 8-minute voice note about how incredible it was, and I stopped recording and I went, I have no one to send this to. So I needed to make these. So yeah, read through this series a second time. I'm going to be reading through the series a third time now, including the short story books, and breaking down every single. For the short story books, I'll do every single short story in the book, and for the main books, I'll break down every chapter. So that's kind of the plan for how these videos are going to go after this one. But just to get into what makes The Witcher so special and why I like it. You know, we're doing this little intro video. Andrei Sapkowski, the author, writes like no other author I've ever read. I don't know how to explain it. I have tried to explain it to my friends many times, and I always come for a loss of words. But I've read Sanderson, I've read Tolkien, N.K. Jemisin, Patrick Rothfuss, George R. R. Martin. I've read a lot of pivotal fantasy authors, not that many, not as many as most, but nothing has come close to these, for me at least. And so I wanted to say something about them. The book guy on YouTube, I guess I'll link his little video in the description. He does a long review of the Witcher series, and he sums up the difference for these books pretty well, I think, as well as I've heard it described. Basically, he kind of separates fantasy books into two categories, commercial fantasy and literary fantasy, or he might use the terms commercial fiction and literary fiction. But still, he describes commercial fantasy as very Disney or just like sticking to traditional tropes, like the hero's journey and so forth, things like that. And there are incredible fantasy series that are commercial fiction. But what he describes The Witcher as is literary fiction, which takes those kind of traditional tropes and flips them on their head. So it's kind of a breath of fresh air because the characters don't stick to these rigid tropes that we often see in commercial fantasy or just in typical fantasy. And even the world itself and a lot of the short stories take fairy tales as their kind of base and flip them on their head, like I said. And we'll see that with the short stories because a lot of the short stories you can pin to a specific fairy tale, like, oh, this is what it was based on. And we're seeing how different it is. It's kind of funny. Once again, we'll get into this further on in the series. There's this duchy in the world called Toussaint, and they describe it as a fairy tale world. And I kind of describe the Witcher world as a whole as a fairy tale world. Not in the sense that everything is like so awesome and everything works out just right, because you might have heard The Witcher is very brutal. You know, there's gore, there's lots of monsters, there's politics. But as I said, a lot of these short stories are based on fairy tales and kind of flipped. And a lot of chapters in the main Witcher series reference these different fairy tales and flip them on their head. So that's why I kind of think of The Witcher as a fairy tale world, but not in the sense that you might think. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to talk about in this little intro video. I'm really excited to dive in. Oh, I should say, The Last Wish I've read once. I read that once before my second read through of the main five books. Sword of Destiny, which I've just finished the first short story in. That's what the next video will be on. I've never read this book before. As I mentioned, I thought this was a later book, so I didn't read it before my second read through. And so I'm reading through it for the first time right now, so you'll get my first reaction to that. And then the main Witcher books, when I get to them, eventually, that will be my third read through on them. And I'm so excited. I am so excited to dive into every chapter, talk about what makes them so amazing to me. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have much more to say. Welcome to the journey. I hope you'll stay. Talking to my friends mostly. I need you guys to read these books. I need somebody to talk to these about. But you know what? I guess if random people on the internet see these videos, and at least I'll have them to talk to about this, you know? I don't know. Okay. That's all for this one, and I'll see you in the first video I record of the Witcher Companion series from the Sword of Destiny, The Bounds of Reason.